So I've had this problem. I've had this problem with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac because, A, I gotta be honest with you, I don't really understand a lot of what's going on. B, they tried to hook up a bunch of deals connected to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac on when I was a teacher in a foreign country that nobody wanted to acknowledge. To this day, they haven't acknowledged. But I know some of them are expecting some payoffs, and they have been for a while. And so they want to put some pressure on me to modify my attitude, right? That I'm supposed to do some sort of marketing pitch or I'm supposed to do some sort of presentation that makes me seem like I'm the kind of home you want to live in, right? You want me to be your real property that you can flip. And I'm completely opposed to this. And by the way, I have outstanding report numbers with HUD. And the thing with Franny and Freddie, I mean, we'll see, right? We'll see after the beginning of this year when that $7 billion comes due. And you already know what that's for. Why? Because a couple years ago, 2020, there was this process where at one point there was information online about how $2 billion, the equivalent of $2 billion of treasure had been found. Well, if nothing else, you know what that could be? Collateral. Now, the thing is, I know that announcements of things like finding a sunken treasure are also derivative reportings for something else. That means that that day there was $2 billion that I'd been tracking that somebody wanted to deal with, do with, engage, invest, spend, launder, divert, without having to actually be held accountable for what it literally was. I understood it in a way of speaking as potentially available as a recovery. A recovery in consideration of specific events that that day not only provided evidence, but that were also connected specifically and precisely to matters related to me bearing witness to numerous women and families headed by women that had been intentionally dispossessed and rendered homeless so somebody else could turn them into their assets. That day just so happened right here in the state of Texas, a number of real estate companies had been advertising that some of their holdings, including ranches, you gotta understand, the kind of women that I've encountered during these time frames have a variety of interests in terms of the kind of home environment that they would like to be involved with, right? And there's been at least three different phases where the time was ripe. There was actually a process where somebody else was claiming some kind of recovery under whatever auspices they thought they were entitled to. And the actual means were available. There was the actual housing. There was the actual time frames to get the paperwork to do it legally. Presumably, there were people you could contact to actually confirm it. Nobody decided to move. Nobody decided to respond, regardless of what the options were, including, by the way, in February of 2017, when I attended a presentation provided at a community organization across the street from the domestic violence shelter I was staying in that was talking about changes to the real estate market and what was available at the time for first time home buyers. See, every woman in that shelter either already owned her own house and was seeking to return to her own damn house, or was a potential first time home buyer with me. That's who we are. That's who we were. What kind of home would we buy? Would we want our own? I mean, these are matters. Anyway, February 29th of 2020, I compiled a list of ranches that did not, in total, equal $2 billion. Let's put it that way. At that day, my understanding is that by the following Monday, the monies could have been processed in order to procure the property, and the transportation could have been arranged. See, I already had three different transportation plans that could have dealt with this. If you actually had law enforcement that did its job, as opposed to engaging in some competitive speculation, then they would have been available to have assisted, insofar as they needed to. The bonds, the financing, well, that's the kind of thing the Attorney General is supposed to know about, and the comptroller is already supposed to have an order so that when those things need to be dealt with, they can be dealt with, and the money was there. The time was there, the property was there. Why am I still waiting until the end of August? See, my understanding is that if you actually needed to go through some process of financing these, including, for instance, taking out some loans, that Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, that's one thing. But the USDA also has a rural mortgage program, a rural housing mortgage program. We're talking about ranches with over 1,000 acres some of these, right? And so this is a very real question in terms of the kind of preferencing or the kind of decision one would engage when it comes to actually deciding how you're going to invest real estate and how you're actually going to provide for what you need. Would there be a specific consideration of a subsidy, or would it be considered in accordance with maybe something having to do with a different bandwidth? And see, this is what I'm concerned is actually going on right now. There is a very specific manner in which exclusivity of access to resources is being concentrated. There's no reason why me and the women with whom I was involved could have already availed ourselves of the benefits of this. It was a need. There was a need for many people to have been able to have been availed of the access to resources such as these. These moments come up and the time frames end up getting delayed. See, I already know this particular paradigm is not going to be used for whatever is attempting to clamor itself for acknowledgement. This is what I'm hearing you say. You need to acknowledge me. No. This was not meant for the second, third tier down the pipeline when you have a more exotic demographic with a greater spread that you can leverage because you intentionally engaged in processes of default, hoping to cover up for your crime. There were very specific constituencies who at the time had been dispossessed that are still dispossessed, including me. And if we had been able to do this in February 2020, or if even we had been able to do this a month ago, when I reminded you, right? And by this time, when there was a need to call up, for instance, people that have some experience in industrial inspection and or responding to some sort of environmental catastrophe, as that might include some sort of damage caused by facilities having problems or by natural disasters ending up exacerbating pre-existing problems, or even doing something that was an extreme situation, then you would have it safely done. You would have had it competently done. You would have had it professionally done. And you wouldn't have needed to be in a situation where you have to make an excuse for, again, obligating the entirety of the country to an alleged emergency appropriation that is then going to be underwritten with distress, because inevitably we weren't prepared. We didn't have the resources we need. We never cleaned up. We never responded to what happened during Hurricane Katrina. That's what you're tearing to here. It's what you've been tearing to for a while. We never dealt with what really happened with Hurricane Katrina. And you may be correct, but you're still not dealing with what happened in Hurricane Katrina any more than you're dealing with what happened in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And the reason you're not is because you do not want to turn on the criminals you've been backing this whole time. Some of those criminals have ranches like these. But then there are also good people that have ranches like these. And I don't know, we're saying as recently as July 4th, hey, you got to take care of some stuff around here or we're going to have a really big fucking problem. Right? And over again, certain things will get a soundbite in order to make that benchmark, but you keep leveraging it for something more and more extreme. I'm not going to join you guys in trying to get your little chit on your sheet regarding talking shit about the situation in Afghanistan. Why? Because for 20 years before the United States screwed it up, somebody else was screwing up Afghanistan. Right? We had other things we were supposed to be responsible for before I even got to go to college, as I just realized today. When you guys tried to close out that account that you were using in connection with sending me to a private university after I had received DOD funded college level education during my senior year of high school, you made a point to tell me I was obligated to pay for long distance phone calls to Central Africa right around the time you were setting up Madeleine Albright for the Secretary of State position. A woman who, by the way, refused to deal with the genocide of Rwanda and other actions that were exacerbated by the United States when it came to dealing with matters in how Central Africa and other parts of Africa were leveraged. And nobody to this day has talked about what happened at that refugee camp in Kenya during the Davos conference either, right? See, unfortunately, I said this before. When you don't appropriately note and you keep raising the bar, you don't just tear forward, you tear back. Right? So all this could have been taken care of today. Now, is there some sort of consideration about, well, today is a day when we're talking about deals and we're talking about relationships, refinancing Fannie Mae, there needs to be some sort of consideration of a proposal. You need to prosecute the criminals. You don't have the credit you need. And the problem is the actual assistance to support that has time and time again been what? Why did you not ever move on what you needed to move on here? It could have already been taken care of, at least in that regard. You would have had that for support. You could have called that up. It could have been available at a moment's notice. You wouldn't have had to play any nasty games where you got to flip some dirty fucking line of finance where you talk shit and make porno. You wouldn't have had to have done that. Why do you keep choosing to cheapen your own people? I really need to know this. Why do you keep trying to sensationalize the economy and utility of engaging in things that are profane, that are depraved, and that are racist and sexist? Why did you allow for an economy to proliferate where vice had a disproportionate value to actually accomplishing the objectives necessary to secure humanity? It's accruing. This is, by my total, $443.57 million. It was a little over $440 million, right? But in February, the money was there. The means were there to have actually done it in February of 2020. You decided we weren't supposed to have that available for now, right?